In the quiet suburbs of Willow Creek, a security consultant was about to face the ultimate test of his own protective systems. What started as a peaceful Tuesday morning took a shocking turn when they came face to face with accusations that would shatter everything he'd built. Marcus Chen wasn't your typical suburban husband. For 20 years, he had spent his life designing security systems that protected others from their worst nightmares, known for his methodical precision and unwavering attention to detail. When he encountered Detective Vasquez's phone call requesting his presence at the police station, he had no idea he was walking into a carefully orchestrated trap. Marcus responded with the confidence of an innocent man that would lead to a devastating realization about the people he trusted most. What began as a routine police interview would become a psychological battlefield where truth and manipulation collided. The peaceful neighborhood of Willow Creek would never be the same after Marcus discovered that the most dangerous predators often hide behind masks of friendship and trust. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus's hand traced the edge of the security panel mounted discreetly beside the front door, its blue LED indicators casting a subtle glow across the entryway. The Willow Creek neighborhood had grown quieter over the past year, but old habits died hard. 20 years in security consulting had taught him that the most dangerous threats often came from those who looked harmless. "Marcus, stop playing with your gadgets and help me with the wine," Sarah called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that familiar note of gentle exasperation that meant she was nervous about the evening ahead. He pressed the final sequence on the keypad, activating the full perimeter system. Motion sensors, door contacts, window alarms, all feeding into the custom monitoring setup he'd installed in his home office. Professional paranoia, Sarah called it. Marcus preferred to think of it as reasonable caution. The doorbell chimed at exactly 7 o'clock. Through the peephole, he could see Elena Rodriguez adjusting her designer scarf, a bottle of expensive wine cradled in her arms. Always punctual, always perfectly put together. Sarah's best friend since college carried herself with the confidence of someone who spent her days dismantling corporate executives in depositions. "Elena!" Sarah's voice brightened as Marcus opened the door. "You look amazing. Is that the new Hermes?" Elena's smile was radiant, transforming her sharp features into something almost maternal. "You know me too well. Had to celebrate winning the Morrison case somehow." She stepped inside, air-kissing Sarah before turning to Marcus. "And how's our resident security expert? Still keeping the neighborhood safe from imaginary threats?" There was something in her tone, playful on the surface but with an edge that made Marcus's shoulders tense. "Just being careful," he replied, accepting her brief embrace. She smelled of expensive perfume and something else, something slightly desperate beneath the carefully constructed facade. "Careful is good," Elena said, her eyes already scanning the foyer. "Though I have to say, Marcus, this setup of yours is impressive." "What's that? A contact sensor on the doorframe?" Sarah laughed, linking arms with both of them. "Don't get him started, or we'll be here all night learning about infrared detection zones." But Elena seemed genuinely interested, her legal mind apparently intrigued by the technical details. As they moved toward the living room where other guests were gathering, Marcus found himself explaining the system's basics. The cameras positioned to cover all entry points, the motion sensors calibrated to distinguish between humans and the neighborhood cats, the backup power supply that kept everything running even during outages. "Fascinating," Elena murmured, her gaze lingering on a camera mount before she turned to greet David and Jennifer Walsh from down the street. "I represented a security firm in a liability case last year. Amazing how much thought goes into these systems." The evening unfolded, with the comfortable rhythm of suburban socializing. Elena held court near the fireplace, regaling their neighbors with sanitized versions of her recent courtroom victories. Her voice carried perfectly, trained through years of addressing juries, as she described outmaneuvering opposing counsel in what she called the corporate equivalent of chess. Marcus found himself studying her performance from across the room. Elena had always been charismatic, but tonight there was something almost manic in her energy. She laughed too loudly at David's weak jokes, touched Jennifer's arm too frequently while speaking, and her eyes kept darting around the room as if cataloging details. "You're doing it again," Sarah whispered, appearing at his elbow with a fresh drink. "Doing what?" That thing where you analyze everyone like they're potential security threats. She nudged him gently. Elena's having a rough time with the divorce. Try to be understanding. Marcus nodded, but something nagged at him. He'd seen Elena navigate her separation with her usual calculated precision. Strategic custody demands, careful asset protection, every move designed for maximum advantage. This almost frantic socializing felt different, more desperate than strategic. The thing about modern security systems, Elena was saying, having somehow steered the conversation back to Marcus's expertise, is they're only as good as their blind spots. Every system has them, right, Marcus? All eyes turned to him. Marcus set down his wine glass, choosing his words carefully. Well-designed systems minimize vulnerabilities, but you're right that perfect coverage is theoretically impossible. It's about layered security, multiple overlapping systems so that if one element fails, others compensate. Elena's smile sharpened. But there are always gaps. Spaces between camera angles, dead zones in motion sensor coverage. A skilled person could probably find them, given enough observation time. The room fell quiet for a moment. Jennifer Walsh laughed nervously. Elena, you sound like you're planning a heist. Just professional curiosity, Elena replied smoothly. You'd be amazed how often security systems become evidence in civil litigation. I always tell my clients that privacy is an illusion in the modern world. Sarah stepped forward, clearly sensing the tension. Who wants dessert? I made that chocolate tart Elena loves. As the evening wound down, Marcus retreated to his office to catch up on client reports. The familiar blue glow of his security monitors provided comfort. Digital eyes watching over their small corner of the world. Through the office window, he could see Elena and Sarah in the kitchen. Elena helping load the dishwasher while gesticulating animatedly about something. 20 minutes later, Sarah appeared in his doorway. Elena's going to stay and help finish cleaning up. You know how she gets when she's avoiding going home to her empty apartment. Marcus nodded, already absorbed in the Peterson account's quarterly security assessment. I'll be up in an hour or so. Don't work too late, Sarah said, but she was already heading back downstairs. From his office, Marcus could hear the distant murmur of conversation, punctuated by Elena's distinctive laugh. Through his security feed, he watched the last neighbors depart, waving goodbye from their perfectly manicured suburban driveways. The street settled into its usual evening quiet, porch lights creating pools of yellow warmth in the gathering. Darkness. An hour passed, then another. The conversation downstairs had shifted from animated chatter to hushed, intense discussion. Marcus caught fragments, Elena's voice tight with emotion, Sarah's responses soothing and sympathetic. Something about custody arrangements, about feeling betrayed, about how some people didn't deserve the happiness they had. When Marcus finally emerged from his office at nearly midnight, he found Elena gathering her purse and coat. Her earlier vivacity had evaporated, leaving her looking older, more fragile. Thank you for tonight, she said, embracing Sarah tightly. I needed this. I needed to be around people who actually care. Anytime, Sarah replied. You know that. Elena turned to Marcus, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. And thank you for the security tutorial. Very illuminating. She paused at the door, looking back at the subtle camera mounted in the corner of the foyer. You've built something really special here. I hope you appreciate what you have. After Elena's taillights disappeared down Maple Street, Sarah leaned against the closed door with a sigh. She's really struggling, Marcus. The custody battle is destroying her. Marcus activated the night security settings, watching the system indicators shift from green to amber. What did she tell you? Just that she feels like everyone's turning against her. Her ex-husband's lawyers are painting her as unstable, unreliable. She's terrified she's going to lose Isabella completely. Maybe she should consider compromise instead of fighting for full custody, Marcus suggested, immediately regretting it when he saw Sarah's expression. That's exactly the kind of thing she's talking about. Everyone thinks she should just accept whatever scrap she's offered. Sarah's voice carried a warning. She's my oldest friend, Marcus. She was there for me when my mother died, when I was falling apart in college. I'm going to be there for her now. Marcus reached for Sarah's hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her wedding ring against his palm. Of course. I just think, sometimes I think you forget that not everyone processes stress the way you do. Sarah interrupted gently. Your answer to everything is more security, better systems, tighter control. But some problems can't be solved with cameras and motion sensors. Later, as Sarah slept beside him, Marcus found himself staring at the ceiling. Through the bedroom's blackout curtains, he could see the subtle red blink of the exterior motion sensor, faithfully monitoring their small piece of suburban paradise. Elena's words echoed in his mind. Every system has blind spots. He'd spent years securing their home against external threats, burglars, vandals, the random violence that occasionally touched even quiet neighborhoods like Willow Creek. But as he listened to Sarah's steady breathing and thought about the brittle desperation he'd seen in Elena's eyes, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous threats weren't always the ones that came from outside. The security system hummed quietly in the walls around them, its electronic vigilance a comfort against the darkness. But for the first time in years, Marcus wondered if he'd been watching for the wrong kind of danger all along. Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee mug, the morning light streaming through his office window carrying none of the warmth he'd felt just 3 days earlier. The Peterson security assessment lay unfinished on his desk, but his mind kept drifting back to Elena's parting words about appreciating what he had. Something in her tone had lodged itself in his consciousness like a splinter. The call came at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that had started like any other. Mr. Chen, this is Detective Vasquez with the Metro Police Department. I need you to come down to the station for questioning regarding an incident that occurred at your residence. Marcus set down his coffee with deliberate care, his security consultant instincts immediately cataloging the detective's tone. Professional, measured, but with an underlying gravity that suggested this wasn't a routine matter. What kind of incident? I'd prefer to discuss the details in person, sir. Are you available this afternoon? Say, around 2 o'clock? The words felt surreal, like dialogue from a television show bleeding into his carefully ordered reality. Detective, I think there's been some mistake. What exactly? 2 o'clock, Mr. Chen. Station house on 5th Street. Ask for Detective Vasquez when you arrive. The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in the sudden quiet of his office. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Patterson from next door tending her roses, the normalcy of the scene at odds with the growing unease in his chest. 20 minutes earlier, Sarah had been dealing with her own unexpected call. She'd been reviewing campaign materials for the Henderson pharmaceutical account when her phone buzzed with Elena's name. Sarah smiled, expecting to hear about Elena's latest legal victory, or perhaps an invitation for lunch. Instead, Elena's voice came through broken and raw, punctuated by what sounded like genuine tears. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Something terrible happened. Sarah immediately minimized her computer screen, giving Elena her full attention. What's wrong? Are you okay? God, I don't even know how to say this. Elena's breathing was ragged, each word seeming to cost her enormous effort. It's about Marcus. Marcus? What about him? I went back to your house yesterday evening. I realized I'd left my earrings, the pearl ones my mother gave me. I couldn't bear to lose them, not after everything with the divorce. Elena's voice cracked. I used the spare key you gave me, the one under the fake rock by the garage. I thought no one was home. Sarah's stomach began to knot. Elena, what happened? He was there. Marcus was there and he attacked me. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, the familiar sounds of her office, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the distant hum of the air conditioning, suddenly seemed impossibly loud. What do you mean attacked? He grabbed me, pushed me against the wall in your hallway, started saying things about how I was always watching, always judging. Elena's sobs intensified. I tried to get away, but he's so much stronger. He put his hands on me, Sarah. He hurt me. Sarah's mind reeled, trying to process what she was hearing. The Marcus she knew, methodical, gentle Marcus who worried about leaving lights on overnight and who always let spiders outside instead of killing them. Attacking her best friend seemed impossible. Elena, are you sure? Maybe there was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Elena's voice turned sharp before dissolving back into tears. Sarah, he left bruises. I have marks on my arms, on my neck. I was so scared I just ran. I didn't even get my earrings. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her own throat. Her mother's face flashed in her memory. The carefully applied makeup that never quite covered the fingerprint bruises. The explanations about walking into doors and falling down stairs. The social worker's gentle voice explaining to 8-year-old Sarah that sometimes people we love hurt us, and that it wasn't her fault. Oh God, Elena. Have you been to a doctor? Have you called the police? I was afraid no one would believe me. He's so respected, so careful about his image. And I know how it looks. Going into your house when you weren't there, using the key without permission. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. But I can't live with this. I can't pretend it didn't happen. Sarah's marketing training kicked in automatically, her mind already processing crisis management strategies even as her heart hammered against her ribs. You need to report this. You need to get medical attention. Will you come with me? I know it's a lot to ask, but I don't think I can do this alone. Of course. Of course I'll come with you. After Elena hung up, Sarah sat frozen in her ergonomic office chair, staring at the motivational poster on her wall that proclaimed, "Success is a team sport." Her hands shook as she tried to process the conversation. Marcus, her Marcus, capable of violence? The man who apologized to furniture when he bumped into it? But then she remembered her mother's bruises, hidden beneath long sleeves and high necklines. Remembered how charming her stepfather had been in public, how neighbors had described him as such a good man at the funeral. Predators, the therapist had explained years later, were rarely obvious. They were often the ones who seemed most trustworthy, most normal. Sarah reached for her phone to call Marcus, then stopped. What would she say? How do you ask your husband if he attacked your best friend? The doubt felt like poison in her veins, but Elena's tears had sounded so genuine, so devastated. Meanwhile, at the Metro police station, Detective Vasquez was conducting his preliminary interview with Elena Rodriguez. At 52, Vasquez had seen enough domestic violence cases to recognize the patterns. The shame, the self-blame, the reluctance to come forward. Elena sat across from him in interview room B, her designer blouse artfully arranged to show finger-shaped bruises on her upper arms. Take your time, Ms. Rodriguez, Vasquez said, his voice carrying the practiced gentleness he'd learned over 15 years of similar interviews. I know this is difficult. Elena dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her legal training evident in how she organized her account despite her obvious distress. I've known Sarah Chen since college. We've been best friends for over a decade. I have a key to their house. They gave it to me years ago for emergencies. And yesterday you used this key to enter their residence? I'd left my earrings there after their dinner party on Saturday. Pearl earrings that belonged to my late mother. With everything going on in my life, the divorce, the custody battle, I couldn't bear to lose them too. Elena's voice caught convincingly. I texted Sarah, but she didn't respond immediately. I thought the house was empty, so I used the key. Vasquez made notes, his pen scratching across the legal pad. What time was this? Around 6:30 in the evening. I work late, but I'd left the office early to handle some personal matters related to my custody case. Elena's breathing hitched. I went straight to the guest bathroom upstairs where I'd left the earrings. That's when I heard footsteps. You weren't aware that Mr. Chen was home? His car wasn't in the driveway. Sarah's wasn't either. The house seemed empty. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture that made the bruises on her upper arms more visible. When I came out of the bathroom, he was standing at the top of the stairs. He looked angry, dangerous. Vasquez had interviewed dozens of domestic violence victims, and Elena's account carried the ring of authenticity. The specific details, the emotional consistency, the physical evidence, it all aligned with genuine trauma. Still, something nagged at him, a professional instinct honed by years of investigation. What happened next? He started yelling about how I was always watching, always judging their relationship. He said I was jealous, that I couldn't stand seeing Sarah happy. Elena's composure cracked further. Then he grabbed me, pushed me against the hallway wall. His hands were around my throat, and he was saying terrible things about what he could do to me, how no one would believe me if I told. Did he make any specific threats? He said. He said that his security system had blind spots, and that he knew exactly where they were. That if I ever tried to cause problems for him and Sarah, he'd make sure I disappeared into one of those blind spots permanently. Vasquez's pen stilled. The mention of security systems felt oddly specific, almost rehearsed. But Elena's tears appeared genuine, and the bruises on her arms were real enough. How did you get away? I managed to break free when he loosened his grip. I ran down the stairs and out the front door. I was so terrified I just drove around, for hours before going home. Elena met his gaze directly. Detective, I know how this looks. I know it seems suspicious that I was in their house without permission, but Marcus Chen attacked me, and I have the bruises to prove it. Vasquez closed his notepad. We'll need photographs of your injuries for evidence, and I'll need to speak with Mr. Chen. Will you arrest him? That depends on what the investigation reveals, ma'am, but I want you to know that we take these allegations very seriously. After Elena left to have her injuries photographed and documented, Vasquez sat alone in the interview room, reviewing his notes. Something felt off about the case, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The victim's account was detailed and consistent. The physical evidence supported her claims, and domestic violence often occurred in seemingly normal households. But Elena Rodriguez was a high-powered attorney, someone who made her living crafting convincing narratives. And her mention of security system blind spots felt too convenient, too perfectly aligned with what she'd need to explain away potential video evidence. Still, his job wasn't to judge credibility based on hunches. His job was to investigate allegations thoroughly and let the evidence speak for itself. And right now, the evidence suggested that Marcus Chen had committed assault. Vasquez reached for his phone to make the call that would shatter Marcus Chen's carefully ordered world. As Marcus drove toward the police station that afternoon, his hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change irrevocably. The security expert who had spent decades protecting others from threats was about to discover that the most dangerous predators were often those who hid behind masks of friendship and trust. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the suburban streets of Willow Creek, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt genuinely afraid of what those shadows might conceal. Marcus's hand gripped the metal door handle of the police station. Entrance. The cold surface a stark reminder that this was no longer his carefully controlled suburban reality. The building's institutional gray walls and fluorescent lighting stripped away any pretense of comfort, replacing the warm familiarity of Willow Creek with the harsh geometry of official suspicion. Detective Ray Vasquez emerged from behind the reception desk with the measured stride of someone who had delivered bad news countless times before. In his early 50s, with graying temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many difficult conversations, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who had learned to read people's souls through their smallest gestures. Mr. Chen, I'm Detective Vasquez. Thank you for coming in. Marcus found himself cataloging details automatically. The detective's firm handshake, the slight wear pattern on his shoes suggesting long hours on his feet, the way his eyes lingered, just a moment too long as if already forming judgments. Detective, I have to say, I'm completely confused about why I'm here. I understand your confusion. Why don't we step into a more private setting where we can discuss this properly? The interview room felt smaller than it probably was, with institutional beige walls and a metal table that reflected the harsh overhead lighting. Two chairs faced each other across a space that seemed designed to eliminate comfort and encourage truth-telling. Marcus noticed the camera mounted in the corner, a basic model, probably 10 years old with coverage angles he could have improved significantly. Before we begin, Vasquez said, settling into his chair with practiced ease, I need to inform you that this is a formal interview regarding allegations of assault. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Miranda rights, allegations of assault. The careful world he'd built around security and control was crumbling with each syllable. Wait, assault? Detective? There's obviously been some serious mistake. Vasquez completed the ritual of rites and warnings before opening a manila folder that seemed impossibly thin to contain something capable of destroying a life. Mr. Chen, yesterday evening around 6:30, were you at your residence on Maple Street? Marcus's mind raced, trying to reconstruct Monday evening. Sarah had worked late, some crisis with the Henderson account. He'd come home around 5:30, heated leftover Chinese food, and settled into his office to finish the Peterson security assessment. Yes, I was home, working in my office. Why? Were you expecting any visitors? No. Sarah was working late, and we didn't have any plans. Marcus felt sweat beginning to form at his hairline despite the room's aggressive air conditioning. Detective, what is this about? Vasquez studied him with the patient intensity of someone trained to recognize deception. Ms. Elena Rodriguez alleges that you assaulted her at your residence yesterday evening. She states that you physically attacked her, leaving bruises on her arms and neck. The words seemed to echo in the small room, bouncing off the beige walls like accusations, seeking purchase. Marcus felt the floor shift beneath him, as if the fundamental laws of physics had suddenly changed. Elena Rodriguez? Elena said He stopped, his mouth suddenly dry. That's impossible. I never… Detective, I haven't seen Elena since Saturday night. Our dinner party. She claims she returned to retrieve jewelry she'd left behind, using a spare key you and your wife had given her. Marcus's security consultant mind immediately began processing the scenario. Elena had access. That much was true. They'd given her a key years ago during a brief period when she'd helped care for Sarah during a bout with pneumonia. But the rest of it… Detective, that's absolutely false. I never laid a hand on Elena. I would never hurt anyone, especially not Sarah's best friend. His voice carried a slight tremor that he couldn't suppress. This has to be some kind of misunderstanding. Vasquez leaned back slightly, his expression neutral but watchful. In his 15 years investigating domestic violence cases, he'd heard similar denials hundreds of times. Can I ask you something? In your experience, when someone makes false accusations, what do they usually hope to gain? Vasquez paused at the door, his hand on the handle. Mr. Chen, in my experience, false accusations are relatively rare. Women who come forward about assault usually have nothing to gain and everything to lose. He met Marcus's eyes directly. But I've also learned that the truth has a way of emerging, regardless of how well people think they've hidden it. As Marcus walked through the police station lobby, past the wanted posters and public safety announcements, he felt like a man emerging from underwater into a world where the rules had fundamentally changed. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Elena told me what happened. We need to talk. The afternoon sun felt different as he stepped outside. Harsher, more exposing. The familiar streets of his suburban neighborhood stretched before him. But they no longer felt like home. They felt like a stage where someone was directing a play he didn't understand, using lines he'd never written, toward an ending that might destroy everything he'd built. Marcus sat in his car in the police station parking lot, his hands trembling, as he called his old college roommate, Jake Morrison. Jake answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone whose day hadn't just been shattered by false accusations. Marcus, how's life in suburban paradise? Jake, I need a lawyer, a good one. I need one right now. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several heartbeats before Jake's voice returned, stripped of its casual warmth and replaced by professional focus. What happened? Someone I trusted just tried to destroy my life, Marcus said, watching a young mother push a stroller past his car, her world still intact and predictable, and I'm starting to think they might succeed. The drive home to Willow Creek felt like traveling through a foreign country where he no longer spoke the language, where the maps he'd relied on for navigation had been redrawn by an enemy he was only beginning to understand. Marcus's hand hesitated on his front door handle as he noticed the unmistakable silhouette of Mrs. Patterson retreating quickly from her kitchen window. The drive home from the police station had felt endless, each familiar street corner now carrying a weight of scrutiny he'd never experienced before. Even the security cameras mounted on neighboring houses, systems he'd helped design and install, seemed to watch him with newfound suspicion. The house felt different when he stepped inside. Sarah's keys weren't on the hall table where she always left them. Her jacket wasn't draped over the dining room chair in the precise way that usually annoyed him. The silence carried in quality that made his skin crawl, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. "Sarah?" His voice echoed in the empty foyer, bouncing off the hardwood floors he'd refinished himself 3 summers ago. No response. Just the familiar hum of his security system and the distant tick of the grandfather clock Sarah had inherited from her grandmother. His phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Flying down tonight. Don't talk to anyone without me present. Don't post on social media. Don't even think about contacting Elena directly." Marcus stared at the message, the reality of his situation crystallizing with each piece of legal advice. He was now the kind of person who needed a criminal defense attorney, the kind of person who couldn't trust his own impulses or words, the kind of person whose life could be destroyed by a conversation. The landline rang, its shrill tone cutting through the house's oppressive quiet. Marcus checked the caller ID. Peterson's Security Consulting, his biggest client. His stomach dropped as he recognized the personal cell number of Robert Peterson, the company's CEO. "Marcus." Peterson's voice carried none of its usual warmth. "We need to talk. Bob, if this is about the quarterly assessment, I can have that finished by—" "Marcus, I'm going to cut to the chase. I got a call this afternoon from Detective Vasquez. He was asking questions about your background, your character, your access to sensitive information." Peterson's tone was that of a man performing an unpleasant but necessary task. "I have to put you on administrative leave, effective immediately." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Peterson Security wasn't just his biggest client, it was the company that had essentially launched his reputation in the industry. Bob Peterson had been a mentor, almost a father figure, someone who'd trusted Marcus with his most sensitive corporate security needs. "Bob, whatever you heard, it's not true. Someone is making false accusations. Marcus, I've known you for 8 years. I don't want to believe this any more than you want to hear it. But I have shareholders, employees, a reputation to protect. Until this gets sorted out, I can't have you associated with our security protocols." Peterson's voice softened slightly. "I hope to God you can prove your innocence. But until you do, my hands are tied." The line went dead, leaving Marcus standing in his kitchen, staring at the phone as if it had just delivered news of a death in the family. In a way, it had. His professional life, 20 years of building trust, establishing credibility, creating a reputation for uncompromising integrity, had just died with a single phone call. Across town, Sarah sat in her car outside Elena's downtown condominium, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she tried to process the conversation she'd just had with her best friend. Elena's voice had been so broken, so genuinely traumatized, that Sarah felt sick thinking about Marcus, her Marcus, being capable of such violence. But doubt gnawed at her like acid. The man who apologized to houseplants when he accidentally brushed against them, who insisted on carrying spiders outside rather than killing them, who had held her through 3 miscarriages with the gentleness of someone handling broken glass. Could that man really attack a woman half his size? Her phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and she stared at it for 4 rings before declining the call. She wasn't ready to hear his voice, to try to reconcile the husband she thought she knew with the man Elena described as a predator. Meanwhile, in the Maple Street house that had been their sanctuary for 5 years, Marcus discovered that isolation had its own particular sound. It was the absence of friendly voices, the silence where supportive phone calls should be, the echo of his own footsteps in rooms that suddenly felt too large. The first email arrived at 6:23 p.m. The subject line read, "Neighborhood Watch Concerns," and came from David Walsh, their next-door neighbor and the informal coordinator of the Willow Creek Community Safety Committee. "Marcus," the email began with none of David's usual casual friendliness, "I've been informed of some serious allegations regarding your conduct. While I understand these are only allegations at this point, I think it's best if you step back from your role in neighborhood security planning until this matter is resolved. I hope you understand that we have to prioritize the safety and comfort of all residents." Marcus read the message 3 times, each pass making him feel smaller, more isolated. David Walsh, who had enthusiastically praised Marcus's security expertise just last month, who had sought his advice on protecting his own family, was now effectively banishing him from the community he'd helped protect. The second blow came via a phone call from Riverside Community College, where Marcus had been scheduled to teach a continuing education course on residential security systems. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the program coordinator, delivered the news with professional detachment. Given the circumstances, we feel it's best to postpone your course indefinitely. Lisa Torres watched the unfolding drama from her kitchen window with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 40 years as a social worker navigating family crises. At 72, she had seen enough human destruction to recognize the patterns, and something about this situation felt wrong to her experienced instincts. She had noticed Elena's visits to the Chen house over the past few months. Always when Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. Always involving careful observations of the property's layout. Elena would walk the perimeter, sometimes making phone calls while studying the camera placements, sometimes taking photos that she claimed were for insurance purposes, when Lisa had casually asked. But Lisa also remembered the afternoon 2 weeks ago, when she'd seen Elena's BMW parked 3 houses down, with Elena sitting inside for nearly an hour, watching the Chen house with the intensity of someone conducting surveillance. When Marcus had come home that day, Elena had quickly started her car and driven away, as if she didn't want to be seen. Lisa's social worker instincts told her that predators often studied their victims carefully before striking. But her 40 years of experience also told her that sometimes the predator wasn't who everyone assumed it was. She made a mental note to pay closer attention to the Chen house, though she wasn't yet sure why. By evening, the isolation was complete. Marcus sat in his home office, surrounded by the security monitors that had once made him feel safe and in control, watching them display a neighborhood that no longer felt like home. His phone had stopped ringing entirely, not because the crisis had passed, but because word had spread through their social circle with the efficiency of a virus. Sarah finally came home at 9:30 p.m., her face drawn and her eyes red from crying. She avoided his gaze as she moved through the house, her usual routine disrupted by the presence of a husband she no longer knew how to trust. "Sarah, we need to talk about this," Marcus said, following her into the kitchen where she was mechanically making tea she probably didn't want. "I don't know what to say to you right now." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Elena showed me the bruises, Marcus. They're real. I never touched her. I swear to you, I never laid a hand on Elena Rodriguez." Sarah turned to face him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that terrified him more than Detective Vasquez's questions or Bob Peterson's dismissal. He saw doubt. Not the external doubt of strangers and colleagues, but the intimate doubt of someone who was questioning everything she thought she knew about the person she'd shared a bed with for 3 years. "She knew things, Marcus. Details about our house, about your security system, about conversations we've had in private. How would she know those things if she hadn't been here when you—" Sarah's voice broke. "When you did what she says you did?" "Because we gave her a key years ago. Because she's been our friend, our guest. Because I explained the security system to her on Saturday night when she asked about it." Marcus felt desperation creeping into his voice. "Sarah, you know me. You know I would never hurt anyone. I thought I knew you." Sarah's words were like physical blows. "But my mother thought she knew my stepfather too. Everyone thought he was wonderful, charming, incapable of violence, right up until the night he put her in the hospital." The comparison hung between them like a blade. Marcus understood, with crystal clarity, that he was no longer fighting just Elena's accusations. He was fighting Sarah's childhood trauma, her deepest fears about the men she allowed into her life, the ghosts of violence that had shaped her ability to trust. "Please," he whispered, "please don't let her do this to us." But Sarah was already walking away, her tea forgotten on the counter, leaving Marcus alone in the kitchen of a house that no longer felt like home. Outside, the security cameras continued their vigilant watch, but Marcus was beginning to understand that the most dangerous threats weren't always the ones that came from outside. Sometimes they came from within, wearing the face of friendship and trust, armed with the knowledge of exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. As he stood in his empty kitchen, surrounded by the security systems that had failed to protect him from the one threat he'd never seen coming, Marcus realized that isolation wasn't just about being alone. It was about being surrounded by people who no longer believed in your innocence, in a community that had already decided your guilt, in a marriage that was crumbling under the weight of perfectly crafted lies. The predator had struck with surgical precision, and Marcus was only beginning to understand the depth of the trap that had been laid for him. Marcus's hand trembled as he reached for his third cup of coffee at 2:47 a.m., the bitter liquid doing nothing to cut through the fog of exhaustion that had settled over him like a shroud. Sleep had become impossible since Sarah moved into the guest bedroom 3 days ago. Her absence from their bed a constant reminder of how thoroughly his life had been dismantled by Elena's accusations. The blue glow of his security monitors painted shadows across his office walls, each screen displaying a different angle of the property he'd spent years protecting. But protection, he was learning, was an illusion when the threat came from someone you'd invited inside. For the past 72 hours, Marcus had been methodically reviewing every frame of security footage from the day Elena claimed he'd attacked her. The main system showed exactly what he'd expected. Nothing. No record of Elena entering the house, no evidence of any confrontation, no proof of the assault she described with such convincing detail. But Elena had been clever. She'd known enough about his system to claim the attack occurred in a blind spot, neutralizing his most obvious defense. What she hadn't known was the extent of Marcus's professional paranoia. 20 years in security consulting had taught him that redundancy was survival. The main system was comprehensive, but it wasn't everything. Hidden throughout the house were backup sensors, auxiliary cameras, and recording devices that even Sarah didn't know about. Old habits from his early consulting days, when proving system effectiveness often meant catching what clients thought couldn't be caught. Marcus pulled up a diagnostic screen he rarely accessed, one that showed data feeds from every device connected to his network. Motion sensors, backup cameras, even the doorbell camera he'd upgraded last year but forgotten to fully integrate into the main system. His finger hovered over a folder labeled AX Recordings that contained feeds from his experimental setup, a secondary system he'd been testing for a client who wanted military-grade surveillance. The cameras were smaller, harder to detect, positioned to cover gaps in traditional security layouts. He clicked the folder open. The timestamp showed Monday, 6:47 p.m. 17 minutes after Elena claimed the assault began. Marcus's heart hammered as he scrolled through the files, looking for anything from that evening. There, a file labeled Perimeter AW01 from 6:31 p.m. The video quality was excellent, the camera positioned to capture the side entrance Elena would have used if she'd come to retrieve her earrings as claimed. Marcus held his breath as he hit play. The screen showed the familiar view of his garden path, empty and peaceful in the evening light. Timestamp, 6:31:45. Nothing. 6:32 when still nothing. Then, at 6:33:112, a figure appeared in the frame. Elena Rodriguez walked confidently along the garden path, her posture nothing like that of someone making a quick, nervous visit to retrieve forgotten jewelry. She moved with purpose, stopping periodically to look around with the calculated awareness of someone conducting surveillance. Marcus leaned forward, his exhaustion forgotten. Elena reached the side door, but didn't use her key immediately. Instead, she spent nearly 3 minutes studying the area, her phone pressed to her ear. Even through the audio pickup, Marcus could hear fragments of her conversation. No cars in the driveway. Checking the motion sensors now. Yes, I remember what you said about the blind spots. Blind spots. She was talking to someone about blind spots before she even entered the house. The video continued. Elena finally used her key, but instead of going directly upstairs to the guest bathroom where she claimed to have left her earrings, she spent 25 minutes methodically moving through the house. The auxiliary cameras tracked her progress. First, to Marcus's office, where she studied his security monitors, then to the living room, where she examined camera angles with the precision of a professional. At 7:14 p.m., Elena returned to the kitchen. What happened next made Marcus's blood run cold. Elena opened her purse and removed what appeared to be a small makeup compact. But instead of checking her appearance, she opened it to reveal what looked like stage makeup, the kind used to create fake bruises and injuries. For the next 10 minutes, Elena carefully applied dark makeup to her arms and neck, using her phone's camera as a mirror to ensure the bruises looked authentic. She took photos of herself from different angles, documenting the fake injuries with the thoroughness of someone building evidence. Marcus watched in horrified fascination as Elena practiced facial expressions in front of her phone camera. Tears, fear, trauma. She rehearsed her story, speaking to herself in broken whispers that the sensitive audio pickup captured clearly. He grabbed me here, pushed me against the wall. I was so scared. I know what you did. For a fraction of a second, Elena's mask slipped. Marcus caught a glimpse of something cold and calculating behind her eyes, before the vulnerable expression returned. I don't know what you mean, she said, but her voice carried a slight tremor that hadn't been there before. Marcus, I know this is hard for you to accept, but... Marcus opened the manila envelope and slid the first photograph across the table. It showed Elena in his kitchen, applying dark makeup to her arms with theatrical precision. Elena stared at the image, her face going pale. When she looked up, the pretense of vulnerability had evaporated entirely. Where did you get this? Her voice was sharp now, stripped of its earlier softness. From my security system, the one you thought you'd outsmarted. Marcus slid another photo across the table, this one showing Elena placing the pearl earrings in the guest bathroom. The earrings you claimed to retrieve? You brought them with you to plant as evidence. Elena's jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus with the cold assessment of a predator whose prey had proven more dangerous than expected. You've been planning this for weeks, Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. Studying my security system, tracking Sarah's schedule, preparing to destroy my life with the same precision I use to protect others. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Elena said quietly. The transformation was complete now. Gone was the traumatized victim, replaced by someone who radiated controlled menace. Then explain it to me. Marcus leaned forward. Help me understand why you decided to destroy the life of someone who never did anything to hurt you. Elena was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the table. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of almost clinical detachment. Do you know what it's like to lose everything, Marcus? To have your life systematically dismantled by people who smile at you while they destroy you? She tilted her head slightly. Of course you don't. You've lived your entire life in a bubble of security and control. This is about your divorce? Your custody battle? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. My divorce was just the catalyst, a demonstration of how easily someone's life can be destroyed when the right pressure is applied in the right places. Her eyes fixed on his with unsettling intensity. My ex-husband had help, Marcus. Professional help from people who specialize in destroying lives. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of help? The kind that knows exactly how to weaponize the legal system against innocent people. The kind that understands how to turn someone's strengths against them. How to make their greatest assets become their greatest vulnerabilities. Elena's smile was razor-sharp. Sound familiar? You're working with them. The people who destroyed your marriage, you're working with them now. I learned from them, Elena corrected. After they finished with me, they offered me a choice. I could spend years fighting a battle I'd already lost, or I could learn their methods and apply them to targets they selected. Marcus's mind raced, trying to process the implications. Targets? I'm a target? Why? Because you're good at what you do, Marcus. Too good. Your security systems have prevented certain activities that some people find inconvenient. Elena's tone was conversational, as if she were discussing the weather. The Peterson account specifically. Your recent upgrades to their corporate security protocols disrupted some very profitable operations. Peterson Security, Marcus's biggest client, the company that had put him on administrative leave. What operations? Industrial espionage, corporate sabotage, the kind of high-level infiltration that requires detailed knowledge of security systems and their vulnerabilities. Elena leaned forward slightly. Your work made certain jobs impossible. Certain people lost significant amounts of money. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Marcus wasn't just a random victim of Elena's personal vendetta. He was a professional target, selected for elimination by people who saw his expertise as a threat to their criminal enterprises. So they recruited you, Marcus said. Turned your personal crisis into a weapon against me. They gave me the tools to destroy the people who destroyed me, Elena replied. But they also gave me new targets, people like you, whose work interferes with their operations. She gestured toward the photographs. This is just business, Marcus. Nothing personal. Nothing personal? Marcus's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. You manipulated my wife's childhood trauma. You turned her against me using her deepest fears. You destroyed my reputation, my career, my marriage. All necessary components of complete destruction, Elena interrupted calmly. Half measures don't work. If you're going to eliminate a target, you have to dismantle every aspect of their life. Professional credibility, personal relationships, social standing, everything has to go. Marcus stared at her, seeing Elena Rodriguez clearly for the first time. Not the successful lawyer, not the traumatized victim, not even the manipulative friend. She was something far more dangerous, a professional destroyer, someone who had weaponized the legal system and human psychology to eliminate threats to a criminal enterprise. What's phase 2? He asked quietly. Elena's eyebrows rose. Slightly. You heard that conversation. Your auxiliary recording equipment is quite good. You caught everything, the planning calls, the coordination with your handler, your reference to this being just the beginning. For the first time, Elena looked genuinely impressed. You're better than they said you were. No wonder they want you eliminated. What's phase 2? Marcus repeated. Sarah, Elena said simply. Once your marriage is completely destroyed, once she's isolated and vulnerable, she becomes useful. Her marketing expertise, her access to corporate accounts through her firm, she'll be recruited just like I was. The trauma of your assault and subsequent conviction will make her desperate for support, for purpose, for revenge against the system that failed her. Marcus felt sick. Elena hadn't just targeted him. She'd planned to recruit his wife into the same criminal network that had destroyed Elena's life. You're going to use her, he said. I'm going to give her the same choice they gave me, Elena corrected. Remain a victim or become a predator. Most people, when given that choice after losing everything, choose predator. Marcus reached into his jacket and activated the digital recorder he'd brought. Elena Rodriguez, I want you to repeat what you just told me about this being part of a larger criminal conspiracy. Elena smiled and shook her head. Oh, Marcus, you're still thinking like someone who believes the system works. She gestured around the coffee shop. Do you see the man in the blue jacket by the window? Or the woman with the laptop at the counter? They've been watching us since you arrived. Marcus glanced around and felt his stomach drop. The people Elena indicated were there, and now that he looked more carefully, they did seem to be paying unusual attention to their conversation. Phase 2 isn't just about Sarah, Elena continued. It's about making sure you never get the chance to use that evidence you've gathered. Your security footage, your recordings, your growing understanding of what you're really dealing with, all of it becomes irrelevant if you're not around to present it. The coffee shop suddenly felt smaller, more threatening. Marcus realized he'd walked into exactly the trap Jake had warned him about. You wanted a confrontation, Elena said, her voice almost gentle now. You wanted to see my face when I realized you'd outsmarted me. But I've been planning this conversation since the moment you discovered that footage. Every word, every revelation, every seemingly unguarded moment, all calculated to give you just enough truth to feel like you're winning while walking you deeper into a situation you can't escape. Marcus's hand moved toward his car keys. But Elena shook her head. I wouldn't, Marcus. The people watching us aren't here to hurt you. Not yet. But they will be very interested in following you home. Seeing what evidence you've gathered, ensuring that your security systems suffer some unfortunate technical failures. The trap was complete. Elena had used his own need for confrontation against him, his desire to understand her motivations, his belief that revealing the truth would somehow set him free. What do you want? He asked quietly. Elena smiled, and, for the first time since he'd known her, the expression looked genuinely pleased. I want you to understand that you never had a chance, Marcus. From the moment they selected you as a target, your fate was sealed. The evidence you've gathered, the truth you've discovered. None of it matters when you're dealing with people who own the very system you're trying to use against them. She stood up, gathering her purse with the casual air of someone finishing a pleasant, social engagement. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, Marcus, and give my love to Sarah when you see her next. Tell her I'm looking forward to our next conversation. As Elena walked toward the exit, Marcus sat frozen in his chair, surrounded by the evidence of a conspiracy far larger and more dangerous than he'd imagined. The photographs of Elena's deception lay scattered on the table like proof of his own naivety. He'd thought he was confronting his accuser. Instead, he'd just received a masterclass in how powerless one man could be against a network of professional destroyers who had turned manipulation into an art form. The man in the blue jacket was still watching him, and Marcus realized that walking into this coffee shop might have been the last free choice he would ever make. Marcus's hand shook as he fumbled with his car keys in the Riverside coffee parking lot, Elena's parting words echoing in his mind like a death sentence. The man in the blue jacket had followed him outside, maintaining a casual distance while pretending to talk on his phone. Every instinct Marcus had developed over 20 years in security consulting screamed that he was being hunted. He drove home through a circuitous route, checking his mirrors obsessively, taking random turns that would expose anyone following him. But the surveillance, if it existed, was too professional to detect with simple countermeasures. By the time he reached Willow Creek, Marcus felt like a man walking through a minefield where every step might be his last. Jake Morrison was waiting in the driveway when Marcus arrived, his rental car parked behind Sarah's empty spot like a barrier against the world that had turned hostile. Jake emerged from his car with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to crisis management, his expression grim as he took in Marcus's haggard appearance. "Jesus, Marcus, you look like hell." Jake's voice carried the blend of concern and professional assessment that had made him one of the most successful criminal defense attorneys in the state. "Tell me you didn't do anything stupid." "I confronted Elena," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "And I learned that everything is so much worse than we thought." Jake's expression darkened. "Get inside. Now. We need to discuss this where we can't be overheard." They moved quickly into the house, Jake automatically scanning the street for watchers before closing the door. In Marcus's office, surrounded by the security monitors that had become both salvation and prison, Marcus recounted his conversation with Elena, while Jake listened with the intense focus of someone calculating legal strategies. "A criminal conspiracy? Targeting security consultants," Jake said when Marcus finished. "Industrial espionage operations disrupted by your work. Professional destroyers who recruit victims to eliminate new targets." He leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. "Marcus, if even half of what Elena told you is true, we're not dealing with a simple false accusation case anymore." "She said they own the system, Jake. That the evidence doesn't matter because they control the people who would evaluate it." "Maybe. But Elena Rodriguez made one crucial mistake in that coffee shop." Jake's expression shifted into the predatory focus that had made him legendary in courtrooms. "She revealed the scope of the conspiracy. That gives us investigative avenues, and it means there are other victims we can potentially identify." Marcus felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. "Other victims? If they're systematically targeting security professionals whose work interferes with criminal operations, you're not the first. There will be a pattern. Other consultants who face similar accusations, other lives destroyed in similar ways." Jake pulled out his laptop. "I'm going to start making calls to attorneys who specialize in federal conspiracy cases. This is bigger than state-level criminal defense now." While Jake worked his phone, reaching out to contacts in the FBI's white-collar crime division, Marcus reviewed his security footage one more time. But now, he was looking for different details. Evidence of the surveillance Elena had mentioned. Signs that his property had been studied by professionals. What he found chilled him to the bone. Going back 6 weeks, the auxiliary cameras showed repeated instances of vehicles parked in positions that provided clear sightlines to his house. Different cars, different license plates, but always positioned to observe without being obvious. Professional surveillance, conducted over an extended period. On his computer, Marcus began cross-referencing the timestamps with his work schedule, his meetings with clients, his security assessments. The pattern that emerged was terrifying in its precision. Every major security upgrade he'd implemented, every vulnerability he'd identified and closed, had been observed and documented by people who viewed his expertise as a threat to their operations. His phone rang. Detective Vasquez's name appeared on the screen. "Mr. Chen, I need you to come to the station. We've had some developments in your case." Marcus exchanged a look with Jake, who nodded grimly. "Detective, my attorney will be accompanying me." "That's fine. But Mr. Chen, I want you to know that we've been conducting our own investigation, and some new information has come to light that changes the nature of this case significantly." 20 minutes later, Marcus and Jake sat across from Detective Vasquez in the same interview room where Marcus's nightmare had begun. But Vasquez's demeanor was different now, less skeptical, more troubled. "Mr. Chen, we've been investigating Ms. Rodriguez's background more thoroughly," Vasquez began, consulting a thick file. "What we've found raises serious questions about her credibility and motives." Jake leaned forward. "What kind of questions?" "Elena Rodriguez has filed similar assault allegations in 3 other cities over the past 5 years: Denver, Seattle, and Phoenix. In each case, the accused was a security professional or law enforcement officer who had recently disrupted significant criminal operations." Marcus felt his heart hammering. What happened to those cases? 2 resulted in plea bargains after the accused lost their jobs and reputations. 1 went to trial and ended in acquittal, but not before the defendant's career was destroyed. Vasquez's expression was grim. "In all 3 cases, Ms. Rodriguez withdrew her accusations after the professional damage was complete, claiming she wanted to move on and heal." "She's done this before," Marcus said, the full scope of Elena's predation becoming clear. "Multiple times." "It gets worse," Vasquez continued. "We've also identified her male accomplice from your security recordings. The voice analysis and phone records led us to a man named Viktor Kozlov, who has connections to organized crime and specializes in corporate intelligence gathering." Jake was taking rapid notes. "Has Rodriguez been arrested?" "We obtained warrants this morning, but she's disappeared. Her apartment has been cleared out. Her office at the law firm hasn't seen her in 3 days, and her credit cards show no activity since yesterday." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena had vanished, likely warned by her handlers that Marcus's evidence was more comprehensive than anticipated. "Detective," Marcus said, "Elena told me yesterday that they were planning to recruit my wife next. She said Sarah would be targeted for manipulation once my life was completely destroyed." Vasquez's expression hardened. "Where is your wife now?" "Staying with friends. She doesn't know about any of this yet." Marcus felt sick thinking about Sarah's vulnerability. She still believes Elena's accusations. "We need to bring her in for protective custody," Vasquez said. "If this conspiracy is as extensive as it appears, Mrs. Chen could be in real danger." Jake's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and his expression grew serious. "It's my contact at the FBI. I need to take this." While Jake stepped out to handle the call, Vasquez continued briefing Marcus on their investigation. "We've also been in contact with your neighbor, Lisa Torres. She's provided some very interesting observations about unusual activity around your property." "Lisa Torres? I barely know her." "She knows you, though. Former social worker, 40 years of experience recognizing manipulation and abuse patterns. She's been documenting Elena Rodriguez's visits to your neighborhood for months." Vasquez slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photographs taken by Lisa from her window. Elena conducting surveillance of the Chen house. Elena meeting with unidentified individuals in parked cars. Elena using professional photography equipment to document security camera angles. Mrs. Torres became suspicious when Elena's behavior didn't match her claimed friendship with your wife. Social workers are trained to recognize predatory patterns, and Elena's surveillance activities triggered her professional instincts. Marcus stared at the photographs, realizing that he'd had an ally watching his back without even knowing it. Lisa Torres had been conducting her own investigation, documenting the conspiracy that had targeted his family. Jake returned to the room, his expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "The FBI is opening a federal investigation. They've identified similar patterns in at least 12 other cities. Security professionals targeted for destruction by what appears to be a coordinated criminal network." 12 other cities? Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope. This is bigger than we imagined, Marcus. They're calling it Operation Blind Spot, a systematic campaign to eliminate security experts whose work interferes with organized crime. Operations. Jake consulted his notes. The good news is that you're not alone. The bad news is that we're dealing with a network that has resources, connections, and a proven track record of destroying lives. Detective Vasquez leaned forward. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you directly. Are you willing to cooperate with a federal investigation? This could put you and your family at considerable risk, but your evidence might be the key to taking down this entire network. Marcus thought about Elena's satisfied smile as she described the systematic destruction of his life. He thought about the other victims, the security professionals who'd been targeted and destroyed before him. He thought about Sarah, vulnerable and unaware of the danger she faced. Detective, I've spent my entire career protecting people from threats they couldn't see coming. This network has been operating in the shadows, destroying lives with impunity. Marcus met Vasquez's eyes. Yes, I'll cooperate, but I want guarantees about my wife's safety. Already in motion, Jake said. The FBI is arranging protective custody for Sarah, and they're coordinating with local law enforcement to establish security around your property. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Coming home. Tonight. Elena's acting strange and I'm scared. Need to talk. The three men exchanged grim looks. Elena's phase 2 was apparently beginning ahead of schedule, and Sarah was walking directly into the manipulative web they'd spent the day unraveling. We need to intercept her before she gets home, Vasquez said, already reaching for his radio. But as Marcus tried calling Sarah's phone, he heard only the automated message that her phone was no longer in service. Elena's network had moved faster than they'd anticipated, and Sarah was now alone with a predator who had spent months planning her psychological destruction. The evidence was building, the federal investigation was beginning, and the scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. But as night fell over Willow Creek, Marcus realized that understanding the trap wasn't the same as escaping it. Somewhere, in the growing darkness, his wife was walking into the final phase of a plan designed to destroy everything he'd built and everyone he loved. Marcus's hand gripped his phone with white-knuckled intensity as Detective Vasquez coordinated with FBI agents to locate Sarah. The police station had transformed into a command center, with federal agents arriving throughout the evening to establish Operation Blind Spot as a multi-jurisdictional investigation. But all the law enforcement resources in the world couldn't ease the gnawing terror Marcus felt, knowing his wife was somewhere in the darkness with Elena Rodriguez. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah's phone pinged back online for exactly 37 seconds. Just long enough for the FBI's technical team to triangulate her location to a warehouse district 15 miles outside the city. Then, the signal vanished again, as if someone had realized their mistake and removed the battery. She's alive, FBI Special Agent Rebecca Chen told Marcus, her professional composure not quite masking her own concern. Despite sharing his surname, Agent Chen was no relation, a coincidence that felt surreal given the circumstances. Elena needs Sarah cooperative, not terrified. The manipulation tactics we've identified in previous cases suggest she'll be trying to convince your wife that you're the real threat. Jake paced the conference room like a caged predator. How long before we can move on that warehouse? SWAT is positioning now, Detective Vasquez replied, studying tactical displays on his laptop. But we need to be careful. If Elena realizes we've found them, she might panic and do something irreversible. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it quickly, her expression shifting from concern to something approaching relief. Sarah just sent a text to Elena's phone. Our technical team intercepted it. She held up her device. She's asking Elena to let her call Marcus, says she's confused and scared and needs to hear his voice. Marcus felt a surge of desperate hope. She's starting to doubt Elena's story. Maybe. Or Elena is coaching her to send that message as part of the psychological manipulation. Agent Chen's tone remained cautious. Elena Rodriguez is a master manipulator. She's had hours to work on your wife's emotional state. Through the station's windows, Marcus could see news vans arriving as word of the federal investigation leaked to the media. His personal nightmare was becoming a public spectacle, but somehow that felt less important than it had a week ago. All that mattered now was getting Sarah back safely. Agent Chen's radio crackled to life. Command, this is Tactical Team Alpha. We have visual on the warehouse. 2 vehicles in the parking area. Elena Rodriguez's BMW and an unknown sedan. Thermal imaging shows 3 heat signatures inside the building. 3 people. Elena, Sarah, and someone else, probably Viktor Kozlov, Elena's handler in the criminal conspiracy. Any movement visible? Agent Chen asked. Negative. Heat signatures are stationary in what appears to be an office area on the 2nd floor. No guards posted, but we're detecting electronic surveillance equipment around the perimeter. Marcus, listened to the tactical updates with growing impatience. Every minute that passed was another minute Elena had to poison Sarah's mind against him, to continue the psychological warfare that had already devastated their marriage. At 12:23 a.m., everything changed. Elena Rodriguez called the police station directly, asking to speak with Detective Vasquez. The call was immediately transferred to Agent Chen, who activated recording equipment while gesturing for Marcus to put on headphones so he could listen. Agent Chen, I assume you're the federal officer investigating my case. Elena's voice carried its familiar note of controlled confidence, though Marcus could detect an undercurrent of strain that hadn't been there during their coffee shop confrontation. Ms. Rodriguez, we've been looking for you. We have several questions about your allegations against Marcus Chen. Elena's laugh was brittle. I'm sure you do. I imagine Marcus has been quite creative in his attempts to discredit me. Has he shown you his security footage yet? Agent Chen exchanged glances with Marcus before responding. Ms. Rodriguez, we have evidence that suggests your accusations may not be accurate. We'd like to discuss this in person. Oh, I'm sure you would, but I'm afraid the situation has become more complicated. Elena's tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. You see, I've had several very illuminating conversations with Sarah Chen this evening. She's learned some fascinating things about her husband. Marcus's blood ran cold. What has she told Sarah? Agent Chen held up a hand, signaling him to remain quiet. Ms. Rodriguez, Mrs. Chen's safety is our primary concern. We'd like to arrange for her immediate release. Release? Elena's voice carried mock surprise. Agent Chen, Sarah isn't being held against her will. She came to me for help. You see, I've been sharing some information about Marcus's extracurricular activities. What kind of activities? The kind that involve using his security expertise to facilitate criminal enterprises. Did you know that Marcus Chen has been selling information about his clients' security systems to organized crime groups? The Peterson account was just the beginning. Marcus felt the world tilt around him. Elena was attempting to flip the narrative, to position him as the criminal while portraying herself as a whistleblower. It was a desperate move, but a clever one. If she could convince Sarah that Marcus was corrupt, she might be able to maintain psychological control even after her false assault allegations collapsed. Agent Chen's voice remained steady. Ms. Rodriguez, we have substantial evidence contradicting your claims. Your own recorded conversations with Viktor Kozlov detail your involvement in a conspiracy to frame innocent security professionals. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 10 seconds before Elena responded, and when she did, her voice had lost all pretense of confidence. You have the warehouse recordings. We have everything, Elena. Your phone calls, planning Marcus's destruction, your coordination with Kozlov, your previous cases in Denver, Seattle, and Phoenix. We know about Operation Blind Spot. Another long silence. Then Elena's voice returned with a note of desperate calculation. Agent Chen, I think you've misunderstood the situation. Yes. I've been working with certain parties to investigate security professionals who were selling information to criminal enterprises. Marcus Chen was a target of that investigation because we had credible intelligence about his corrupt activities. Marcus started to object, but Agent Chen silenced him with a gesture. Elena, we've reviewed Marcus's financial records, his client communications, his work products. There's no evidence of criminal activity, but we have extensive evidence of your conspiracy to frame him. The evidence you think you have is fabricated, Elena replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus is very good at covering his tracks. The assault, The assault that you staged using theatrical makeup while Marcus was in his office working? The assault you documented with fake photographs before planting evidence to support your story? Agent Chen's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Elena, we have video footage of your entire performance. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could almost hear Elena's mind racing, trying to find an angle, a new lie, a way to salvage her position. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You don't understand what you're dealing with. The people I work for don't accept failure. Then help us bring them down, Agent Chen said immediately. Cooperate with our investigation. Testify against Kozlov and the network he represents. We can protect you, Elena, but only if you stop this now. Protect me? Elena's laugh was bitter and hollow. Agent Chen, you have no idea what these people are capable of. I've seen what happens to operatives who fail or betray the organization. Protection isn't possible when your enemies have unlimited resources and patience. Marcus leaned toward the microphone. Elena, let Sarah go. Whatever happens between us, whatever consequences you face, don't drag her into this any deeper. Marcus. Elena's voice carried a strange note of almost affection. You still don't understand, do you? Sarah isn't a victim in this anymore. Over the past few hours, I've shown her evidence of your corruption. Financial records, encrypted. Communications, client data sales, all fabricated but very convincing. She believes you've been living a double life, using your marriage as cover for criminal activities. Marcus felt sick. You're lying. Am I? Why don't you ask her yourself? The line went quiet for a moment. Then Sarah's voice came through, the speakers, distant and hollow. Marcus, is that you? Sarah, thank God. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Sarah's voice broke. I'm so confused. Elena has shown me things, documents that suggest that our whole marriage has been. She couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah, whatever Elena has shown you is fabricated. She's been planning this for months. She's part of a criminal conspiracy that targets security professionals. The FBI has evidence. Evidence? Sarah's voice carried a note of hysteria. Elena has evidence too. Bank records showing payments from criminal organizations. Encrypted communications, where you discuss selling client security information. Photos of you meeting with known criminals. Marcus closed his eyes, understanding the full scope of Elena's psychological warfare. She hadn't just attacked him. She'd spent hours systematically destroying Sarah's ability to trust anything he said, creating a false reality so convincing that even federal law enforcement might have trouble dismantling it quickly enough to save his marriage. Agent Chen took control of the conversation. Mrs. Chen, this is FBI Special Agent Rebecca Chen. The evidence Ms. Rodriguez has shown you is fabricated. We have extensive documentation proving that she's part of a criminal conspiracy designed to destroy your husband's career and reputation. How do I know you're really FBI? Sarah's voice was small, frightened. Elena warned me that Marcus might use fake law enforcement contacts to try to discredit her. The paranoia was complete. Elena had inoculated Sarah against believing anyone who contradicted her narrative, creating a closed system of lies that fed on itself. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice breaking, remember our first anniversary? We went to that little restaurant in the mountains, and you got food poisoning from the fish. I stayed up all night taking care of you, and you said I was the most patient man you'd ever known. Do you remember what you told me the next morning? Silence. You said you'd never felt safer with anyone in your life. You said you knew I would never hurt you, never lie to you, never do anything to break the trust between us. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. That man, the man you trusted completely, is still here. He's still the same person who held your hair back while you were sick, who cried with you through 3 miscarriages, who spent every night for 6 months sleeping in the chair next to your hospital bed when you had pneumonia. I'm still that man, Sarah. Elena is trying to destroy that trust, but I'm still that man. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Sarah spoke again, and when she did, her voice carried the first note of doubt Elena's manipulation. Marcus, if all of this is lies, If Elena is really trying to destroy us, why would she do that? She's been my friend for 15 years. Because she's being paid to do it, Agent Chen interjected. Because your husband's security work interfered with criminal operations worth millions of dollars. Because she was recruited by people who specialize in destroying lives as a business model. Elena's voice cut through the conversation, sharp and desperate. Don't listen to them, Sarah. They're trying to confuse you, to make you doubt what you've seen with your own eyes. The evidence I've shown you is real. Marcus has been deceiving you for years. Then let's settle this right now, Agent Chen said. Ms. Rodriguez, you claim to have evidence of Marcus Chen's criminal activities. We have evidence that you fabricated assault allegations and conspired to frame an innocent man. Let's bring everyone to the police station and let federal forensic experts examine all the evidence simultaneously. That's not possible right now. Why not? Because Sarah is too fragile emotionally to be subjected to more questioning. Tonight. She needs time to process what she's learned. Marcus recognized the deflection immediately. Elena was stalling because her fabricated evidence wouldn't withstand federal forensic analysis, and she knew it. Agent Chen's voice became commanding. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm going to give you exactly 1 hour to bring Mrs. Chen to the federal building downtown. If you don't appear voluntarily, we'll obtain warrants for your arrest on federal conspiracy charges and use tactical teams to bring you in. Your choice. The line went dead. Agent Chen turned to Marcus, her expression mixing sympathy with professional determination. We've got tactical teams surrounding the warehouse. If Elena tries to run, we'll intercept her. But I think she's going to try one last manipulation. What do you mean? She's going to try to convince Sarah to disappear with her, to claim they're both in danger from your criminal associates and need to go into hiding. Agent Chen consulted her watch. Elena Rodriguez is a professional manipulator, but she's also desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. At 1:15 a.m., exactly 47 minutes later, Elena Rodriguez and Sarah Chen walked into the federal building downtown. Sarah looked like someone emerging from a trauma. Pale, shaken, clinging to Elena's arm as if it were a lifeline in stormy seas. But as they entered the building, passing through metal detectors and federal security, Marcus saw something in Sarah's eyes that gave him hope. Doubt. The kind of doubt that suggested Elena's psychological control was finally beginning to crack. The confrontation that followed would determine not just Marcus's legal fate, but the future of his marriage and Sarah's ability to trust her own judgment ever again. In a sterile federal conference room, surrounded by evidence both real and fabricated, the final battle between truth and manipulation was about to begin. Elena Rodriguez had spent months planning the perfect frame, but she was about to discover that federal investigators had resources and expertise that even professional destroyers couldn't anticipate. The question was whether the truth would emerge quickly enough to save the relationships Elena had spent so much effort destroying. As they walked toward the conference room, where forensic experts waited with both Elena's fabricated evidence and Marcus's genuine security footage, Marcus realized that vindication might be within reach, but the cost of Elena's psychological warfare would echo through his life for years to come. The legal resolution was beginning, but the human wreckage would take much longer to repair. Marcus's hand trembled as he signed the final document releasing him from all criminal charges, the federal prosecutor's stamp making his vindication official after 3 weeks of intensive investigation. The federal conference room where Elena Rodriguez's elaborate conspiracy had finally unraveled felt different now. Less like a battlefield, and more like a courtroom where justice had eventually prevailed, though at a cost that couldn't be measured in legal terms. Agent Rebecca Chen closed the thick case file that had consumed her life for nearly a month. It's over, Marcus. Elena Rodriguez has been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and filing false police reports. Victor Kozlov received 15 years for his role as the network's operations coordinator. We've identified and arrested 17 other operatives across 12 states. The numbers should have felt like victory, but Marcus found himself thinking about Sarah, who sat across the table from him with the careful distance of someone navigating a minefield. 3 weeks of couples therapy with Dr. Amanda Foster had helped them communicate again, but the easy intimacy they'd once shared felt as fragile as spun glass. What about the other victims? Sarah asked, her voice carrying the clinical interest that had replaced her former warmth. The security professionals who were targeted before Marcus? Jake Morrison consulted his legal pad, filled with notes, from depositions and plea bargains. 2 have had their convictions overturned and are pursuing civil litigation. 3 others never faced criminal charges, but lost their careers and reputations. The civil suits against the criminal network are going to be complex, but there's potential for significant financial recovery. Marcus nodded, though money felt irrelevant compared to the relationships that Elena's manipulation had poisoned. What about Peterson's security? Bob Peterson called yesterday, Jake replied carefully. He wants to meet with you next week to discuss reinstating your contract. He's also talking about hiring you as their chief security officer. Marcus's hand moved with practiced efficiency as he adjusted the final camera angle in the community center's main hall, his expertise now serving a very different purpose than the corporate security work that had once defined his career. 2 years had passed since Elena Rodriguez's conspiracy had been exposed, and the man who had once protected boardrooms and executive suites now spent his days helping ordinary people recognize and defend against sophisticated manipulation. Testing audio on Channel 3. Sarah's voice came through his earpiece, clear and confident. She had become his partner in more than just marriage. Her marketing expertise and hard-won understanding of psychological manipulation had made her an invaluable ally in their new mission. Together, they had created the Center for Trust and Security Education, a nonprofit organization that provided resources for victims of elaborate fraud schemes. The community center buzzed with quiet activity as volunteers prepared for the evening's event. Tonight marked the 2nd anniversary of Operation Blind Spot's exposure, and they were hosting a symposium on recognizing and preventing psychological manipulation. The attendees would include law enforcement officers, social workers, legal professionals, and survivors of various fraud schemes, a community Marcus never knew existed until he'd been forced to join it. Camera angles look good from here, Marcus replied, stepping back to survey the setup. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was using surveillance equipment to help people protect themselves from the kind of predators who had once targeted him. But this felt different, transparent, consensual, designed to empower rather than exploit. Dr. Amanda Foster appeared at his side, carrying a stack of presentation materials and wearing the focused expression that meant she was mentally rehearsing her keynote speech. Marcus, I wanted to thank you again for organizing this. 2 years ago, I thought I understood manipulation and trauma. Your case taught me how much I still had to learn. We all learned, Marcus replied, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. That's why this matters. The past 2 years had been a study in reconstruction, not just of his marriage and reputation, but of his understanding of what security really meant. Traditional security focused on external threats, physical barriers, technological solutions. But Elena's attack had come from within, exploiting trust and emotional vulnerability in ways that no camera or alarm system could detect. 5 minutes to start time, Sarah announced through the sound system, her voice carrying the professional confidence she'd rebuilt after months of questioning her own judgment. She had become one of the nonprofit's most effective advocates, speaking at conferences about the psychology of manipulation and the importance of supporting victims without judgment. Marcus watched the audience file into the hall, a mix of faces he recognized and others he didn't, all connected by the shared understanding that deception could wear any face, carry any credentials, target anyone. Lisa Torres sat in the front row, her social worker's instincts having proven crucial not just in Marcus's case, but in identifying similar patterns in her subsequent work. Detective Vasquez occupied an aisle seat, his investigation of Operation Blind Spot having earned him a promotion and a new role in training officers to recognize sophisticated fraud schemes. Jake Morrison entered with his family, his newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in her carrier, while his wife chatted with other attendees. Jake's legal expertise had been instrumental in establishing the nonprofit structure and ensuring that their work remained within proper legal boundaries. He had also helped several other Operation Blind Spot victims pursue civil litigation, creating precedents that would help future targets seek justice. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah's voice drew Marcus's attention back to the present. Welcome to the 2nd Annual Symposium on Trust and Security. 2 years ago, Many of us learned firsthand how sophisticated manipulation can destroy lives, relationships, and communities. Tonight we gather not as victims, but as educators, advocates, and guardians of truth. Marcus felt a familiar surge of pride watching his wife command the room with quiet authority. The woman who had once been paralyzed by doubt about her own judgment now helped others navigate similar crises with wisdom earned through suffering and recovery. Our first speaker tonight has dedicated her career to understanding how psychological manipulation works and how communities can build resilience against it. Please welcome Dr. Amanda Foster. As Dr. Foster took the podium, Marcus slipped out of the main hall to check on the other activities taking place throughout the building. In one classroom, a support group for falsely accused individuals was meeting, men and women whose lives had been shattered by elaborate frame jobs, working together to rebuild their sense of self and trust in others. Marcus had started the group 18 months ago, and it had grown to include chapters in 6 states. Down the hall, a team of volunteer attorneys was providing free legal consultations for fraud victims, helping them understand their rights and options. The legal system that had once seemed stacked against Marcus now served as a tool for empowerment, though he'd learned that justice was often more complex and slower than he'd once believed. In another room, a cybersecurity expert was teaching senior citizens how to recognize and avoid online scams, a different type of manipulation, but one that shared psychological foundations with more sophisticated operations like Elena's conspiracy. The interconnected nature of predatory behavior had surprised Marcus initially, but now seemed obvious. Whether the target was an elderly person's savings or a security consultant's reputation, the basic principles remained the same: identify vulnerabilities, exploit trust, and maintain control through psychological manipulation. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Rebecca Chen. Kozlov's parole hearing denied. Won't be eligible again for 5 years. Thought you'd want to know. The news brought a mixture of relief and complicated emotions. Viktor Kozlov, Elena's handler in the criminal conspiracy, would remain in federal prison for the foreseeable future. But Marcus had learned that true security didn't come from keeping specific individuals locked away. It came from building communities resilient enough to recognize and resist manipulation in all its forms. Returning to the main hall, Marcus found Dr. Foster midway through her presentation on the neuroscience of trust and betrayal. Her research had been influenced by the Operation Blind Spot cases, contributing to a growing body of academic work on sophisticated fraud schemes. The human brain is wired to trust, Dr. Foster was explaining to the rapt audience. This isn't a weakness. It's fundamental to how we form relationships, build communities, and function as social beings. But predators understand this wiring and exploit it systematically. Marcus had heard variations of this presentation dozens of times, but it never stopped being relevant. Understanding the psychology of manipulation had been crucial to his own recovery, helping him recognize that being deceived by a professional manipulator wasn't a personal failing, but a predictable response to calculated exploitation. The good news, Dr. Foster continued, is that awareness and education can build resilience without destroying our capacity for trust. Communities that understand manipulation are communities that can protect their most vulnerable members while maintaining the social bonds that make life meaningful. As the presentation concluded, Marcus noticed a woman in the back of the room who seemed familiar but out of place. She was well-dressed, professionally groomed, and taking notes with the focused attention of someone gathering intelligence rather than seeking help. Something about her posture and the way she scanned the room triggered Marcus's professional instincts. During the break between presentations, Marcus approached her casually. "Are you finding the information helpful?" She looked up with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Very informative. I'm researching security vulnerabilities for a consulting firm. Your case study is quite famous in certain circles." The response felt rehearsed, and Marcus found himself automatically cataloging details. Expensive jewelry, designer handbag, shoes that suggested someone who spent significant time on her feet but maintained a professional appearance. The combination was familiar, though he couldn't immediately place why. "Which consulting firm?" he asked, his tone remaining conversational. "Sterling Associates. We specialize in corporate risk assessment." She handed him a business card that looked professionally printed but felt slightly off. The paper quality was good, but not quite right for a high-end consulting firm. Marcus accepted the card with a smile. Well, I hope our work here proves useful for your research. As she moved away to mingle with other attendees, Marcus discreetly photographed the business card and sent it to Agent Chen with a brief message. Possible surveillance at tonight's event. Can you run this? Within 15 minutes, his phone buzzed with a response. Sterling Associates is a shell company, registered 3 weeks ago. Woman in question matches description of operative we've been tracking in connection with copycat schemes. Can you delay her departure? Marcus felt the familiar adrenaline surge of recognizing a threat, but also something new. Confidence in his ability to handle the situation. 2 years of recovery and education had taught him that predators relied on secrecy and isolation. In a room full of people trained to recognize manipulation, surrounded by law enforcement officers and legal professionals, the woman represented a manageable threat rather than an existential crisis. He found Sarah at the registration table, quietly explained the situation, and watched her nod with the calm competence of someone who had learned to trust her instincts again. Together, they discreetly alerted Detective Vasquez and Dr. Foster, who began engaging the suspected operative in conversation while federal agents were contacted. It's almost poetic, Sarah murmured as they watched the woman realize she was surrounded by exactly the wrong audience for whatever operation she'd been planning. She came here to study our methods and walked into a room full of people trained to spot exactly what she was doing. The woman was taken into custody an hour later, though not before attempting to claim she was a legitimate researcher conducting academic work. But her story quickly fell apart under professional questioning, and by the end of the evening, Agent Chen had confirmed that she was part of a new network, attempting to replicate Operation Blindspot's methods. Different organization, same basic approach, Agent Chen explained to Marcus and Sarah as the community center emptied. They've been studying the court records from Elena's case, trying to learn from her mistakes. But they underestimated how much the anti-fraud community has learned and networked since then. As they cleaned up after the symposium, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that terrible Tuesday, when Detective Vasquez had first called him to the police station. The man who had once trusted his security systems to protect him now understood that true security came from human connections, shared knowledge, and communities committed to protecting each other. You know what I realized tonight? Sarah said as they loaded equipment into their car. Elena's biggest failure wasn't getting caught. It was believing that destroying trust between two people would make them weaker. Marcus considered this as they drove home through the familiar streets of Willow Creek, past the houses where neighbors had become allies, where suspicion had been replaced by watchful care. What do you mean? She thought that if she could make us distrust each other, we'd be easier targets in the future. But going through that experience together, doing the work to rebuild, it made us stronger. Not just individually, but as a team. Sarah reached over to take his hand. The trust we have now is different than what we had before. It's more intentional, more aware, more resilient. Their house came into view, still equipped with Marcus's comprehensive security system, but no longer feeling like a fortress against the world. It had become something else. A home base for work that extended far beyond their property lines. A place where trust was actively cultivated rather than simply assumed. As they settled into bed that night, Marcus thought about the woman who had been arrested at the symposium. Somewhere, other targets were being selected. Other lives were being studied for vulnerabilities. Other communities were facing threats they didn't yet recognize. But now there was a network of people working to identify and counter those threats. A growing community of individuals who understood that security wasn't just about protecting yourself. It was about protecting each other. Marcus, Sarah said, quietly in the darkness. Do you think we would have found this work if Elena hadn't targeted us? It was a question that had no answer, but Marcus understood what Sarah was really asking. Had their suffering served a purpose beyond their own growth and recovery? I don't know, he replied honestly. But I know that the work matters regardless of how we found it. Every person we help recognize manipulation. Every community that becomes more resilient. Every predator who gets caught before they can destroy another family. That has value independent of our personal journey. Sarah curled against his side, and Marcus felt the deep contentment of someone who had learned that security wasn't about building walls against the world, but about building bridges strong enough to support each other when those walls inevitably failed. Outside, the security cameras continued their vigilant watch over Willow Creek. But inside their home, Marcus and Sarah had created something more powerful than any technological defense. A partnership forged in crisis, tempered by recovery, and dedicated to ensuring that other families wouldn't have to face the kind of sophisticated predation they had survived. The frame Elena Rodriguez had tried to build around Marcus had ultimately framed something entirely different. A love story about resilience, a community story about collective defense, and a human story about the possibility of transforming victimization into purpose. They had not just survived the trap. They had used their experience to help others recognize and escape similar snares, creating a legacy of protection that would outlast any individual threat. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. His professional reputation had actually been enhanced by surviving Elena's frame job. The media had portrayed him as a hero who'd exposed a major criminal conspiracy, and his expertise in security systems had proven valuable in ways he'd never anticipated. But success felt hollow when the person he most wanted to share it with could barely look at him without flinching. Dr. Amanda Foster had warned them that recovery from psychological manipulation took time, that Sarah's ability to trust her own judgment had been systematically destroyed by someone who understood exactly how to weaponize childhood trauma. The woman who had once found safety in Marcus's methodical nature now saw potential threats in his careful planning, his attention to detail, his need for control. "I need some air," Sarah said abruptly, standing with the careful movements of someone afraid of triggering conflict. "This is all. It's a lot to process." Marcus watched his wife walk out of the conference room, noting how she avoided his eyes, how she held herself with the protective posture of someone expecting attack. 3 weeks of therapy had taught him to recognize the signs of Elena's lasting damage, but understanding the psychology didn't make it hurt less. Agent Chen gathered her files with the efficiency of someone moving on to the next case. "Marcus, I want you to know that your security footage was crucial to breaking this conspiracy open. Without your redundant recording systems, Elena Rodriguez might have destroyed a dozen more lives before we caught her. It doesn't feel like a victory when my own wife can't stand to be in the same room with me." "Psychological manipulation is insidious," Agent Chen replied, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Elena Rodriguez spent 15 years learning how to destroy people's ability to trust. The fact that Sarah is even trying to rebuild your relationship is remarkable." Marcus knew she was right, but intellectual understanding didn't ease the pain of watching Sarah flinch when he moved too quickly, or the way she'd started sleeping in the guest bedroom, temporarily, 3 weeks ago. Elena's most devastating victory hadn't been the false accusations. It had been convincing Sarah that the foundation of their marriage was built on lies. After the meeting, Marcus drove through Willow Creek for the first time since the news coverage had died down. The neighborhood looked the same, but the dynamics had shifted in subtle ways. Some neighbors, like Lisa Torres, had become unexpected allies, offering support and sharing their own observations of Elena's suspicious behavior. Others maintained a careful distance, as if false accusations might be contagious. Mrs. Patterson was working in her garden when Marcus pulled into his driveway. She looked up with the expression of someone who had spent weeks rehearsing a conversation. "Marcus," she called out, walking toward his property line with determined steps. "I owe you an apology." Marcus stopped, his hand on his front door. "Mrs. Patterson, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." Her voice carried the firmness of someone who had raised 5 children and brooked no nonsense. "I avoided you when those accusations came out. I listened to gossip instead of trusting my own judgment about your character. That was wrong, and I'm sorry." The simple apology hit Marcus harder than he'd expected. "Thank you. That means more than you know. Harold and I talked it over, and we want you to know that if you and Sarah need anything at all, you just ask. Good neighbors look out for each other, and we failed at that." Inside his house, Marcus stood in the foyer where Elena's psychological warfare had begun, looking at the security camera that had captured her fake victim performance. The system that had saved him professionally felt like a prison now, constantly, reminding him of the calculated nature of the attack on his life. Sarah came home an hour later, carrying grocery bags with the mechanical efficiency of someone going through motions. She'd been doing that a lot lately, cooking elaborate meals neither of them had appetites for, organizing closets that were already organized, staying busy enough to avoid the conversations they both knew they needed to have. "How was the meeting?" she asked, unpacking vegetables with careful precision. "Elena got 8 years. The conspiracy case is closed." Marcus watched his wife's shoulders tense at the mention of Elena's name. "Peterson wants to hire me back." "That's good. You deserve that recognition." The conversation felt like diplomatic. Relations between wary nations. Polite, careful, devoid of the emotional intimacy that had once made their house feel like home. "Sarah, we need to talk about what comes next. About us." She stopped unpacking groceries, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "I don't know what to say, Marcus. I know intellectually that Elena manipulated me, that the evidence she showed me was fabricated. Dr. Foster has explained the psychology of it all very clearly. But I can't just turn off the doubt. When I look at you, part of me still sees the man Elena convinced me you were. The rational part of my brain knows that's wrong, but the emotional part—" Sarah's voice broke. "The emotional part keeps asking what else I might have missed, what other lies I might have believed, how I could have been so completely fooled by someone I trusted for 15 years. Marcus felt the familiar ache of watching someone he loved struggle with damage he couldn't fix. "Sarah, Elena was a professional. She'd done this before, destroyed other people's lives using the same techniques. You weren't fooled because you're naive or stupid. You were targeted by someone who specialized in psychological manipulation. I know that. Intellectually, I know that." Sarah turned to face him, and Marcus saw tears in her eyes for the first time in weeks. "But Marcus, if I could be that wrong about Elena, if I could be convinced that you were a criminal, that our entire marriage was a lie, how can I trust my own judgment about anything?" The question hung between them like a chasm. Elena's most sophisticated victory hadn't been convincing Sarah that Marcus was guilty. It had been convincing her that her own perceptions were unreliable, that she couldn't trust herself to distinguish truth from manipulation. "We're supposed to go to therapy tomorrow," Marcus said carefully. "Dr. Foster says that rebuilding trust is a process, that it takes time." "I know. And I want to try, Marcus. I really do. But I need you to understand that this isn't just about forgiving you for something you didn't do. This is about learning to forgive myself for being so completely deceived." That evening, Marcus found himself in his office, staring at the security monitors that displayed their quiet neighborhood. The cameras that had saved his reputation felt different now. Less like protection and more like evidence of his inability to prevent the most important threats from reaching the people he loved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.